Dave Talks Comics, episode 39, Superman the Animated Series and Dredd. Dave Talks Comics is a podcast on the subjects of comic books and cartoons, where I, Dave Levine, talk about comics I have read and cartoons I have watched. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com. On Twitter, at Dave Talks Comics. Email can be sent to dave@davetalkscomics.com. I talk from my notes on these comics and cartoons. I don't go panel by panel. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. And this podcast is not spoiler-free. I will be talking about what was in these cartoons and such. Oh, and on that note, but I try not to spoil everything. But I'm probably going to spoil something in the process of talking about them. Anyhow, on this episode, I will be talking about Superman the Animated Series, specifically the last two episodes, which were a single story called Legacy. And I will be talking about the 2012 movie Dredd, which was a film version of Judge Dredd, the Judge Dredd comic book. Oh, and one more thing I forgot. There is one point when I'm talking about Superman the Animated Series where I think I say Brainiac and Granny Goodness when I meant to say Darkseid and Granny Goodness. Anyhow, I'm not going to go in and edit that, but I just wanted to alert you to that fact. Superman the Animated Series, Legacy. This is the last story. It's a two-parter in the entire run of the series. And, of course, I'm not counting anything that came after. Like, I think there was a direct-to-video called Brainiac Attacks, which was made several years after the main series was. But I don't count that, and I haven't seen that. So I just want to talk about the last story. That there was a number of stories in the last few, a number of episodes in the last few that were very good. This was by far my favorite. And basically the story is that Superman shows up brainwashed, and you find out that it's Brainiac and Granny Goodness who are behind the brainwashing, and they have sent him to Earth Superman to Earth, to conquer Earth and destroy Earth, I think. You know, with the assistance of all sorts of parademons and other weaponry that Darkseid has provided him with. And I thought this was a great episode. And it's one of those stories that is referred to in the JLU series. And kind of to take a step back from that, there's a couple of stories that are referred to in JLU. I mean, first off, you really need to watch the Justice League series, the 2 seasons of Justice League that came before JLU. You don't have to, but there's a lot of things that are followed up on in there. The relationship between Green Lantern and Hawkgirl. There's especially the finale to the Justice League, to Star-Crossed, plays a big role in both the first and second seasons. Well, it has an impact on the first and second seasons. For instance, Hawkgirl isn't present in the first season, or barely present in the first season of JLU. I think she's present. She shows up a couple times, but she goes from in Justice League, she's one of the 7 that you see at the beginning of every episode, and then in season 1 at least of JLU, she's no longer. It's only 6. So Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Flash. Superman, Batman. Oh no, not Aquaman. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Flash, and Martian Manhunter. That's the other one. So, and there's one episode in particular from Justice League that you really should watch. You really should see, and that's A Better Tomorrow, which is the episode, and this is referred to a number of times, where the Justice League ends up in a parallel universe, and where the Justice League there isn't called the Justice League, but they're called the Justice Lords, and they're evil, and very cool. Very cool episode, and there's a lot of references to it. In the same way, Legacy, the last story from the Superman, the animated series, is referred to a number of times, including in the first season of Justice League Unlimited, because this whole idea of Superman being turned by Darkseid becomes an issue with the government saying, well, we don't know when you guys could change, in the same way that when the Justice Lords show up, they reference both of these instances. And also in the episode Fearful Symmetry, the JLU episode Fearful Symmetry, there's references to that back to events which I didn't know about. Well, I'd heard about, but I hadn't actually seen until I saw Legacy. So it's a good episode for that. There's a lot of good supporting cast in Legacy. Like I mentioned, you have Darkseid, you have Granny Goodness, who of course is voiced by Ed Asner, which I think is brilliant casting. You have Supergirl in there, and the episode opens kind of with Superman's disappeared, nobody knows where he is, and so Supergirl is trying to take care of everything on her own and not let on to the fact that Superman has disappeared by using Superman's robot duplicates of himself, which if you've read the Silver Age, any of the Silver Age comics, well, if you read some of the Silver Age comics, you may know about those. I'm not sure if they've been used previously in the Bruce Timm series or not, but it's there's some good humorous moments there. And also you have the Female Furies. I think that's what they're called. They were the ones who are Granny Goodness's proteges, I guess you could say. And they play a role in this. The other cool thing that you get to see in this, and this is another thing that gets referenced in JLU, is you have Lex Luthor coming to the rescue because Superman's gone nuts. So Lex Luthor comes in and tells the army he's got this weapon that can stop Superman, which of course involves kryptonite. So that was kind of neat, seeing a little bit of table turning there, where Superman's the bad guy, Luthor's the good guy. There was a very cool sequence where they show Superman's brainwashing, and he's trying to shake it off. He knows something is wrong. Supergirl's trying to talk to him. Lois is trying to talk to him, and I think it's Lois. I think it's when Lois is trying to talk to him that he starts having these flashbacks, and you get to see the entire brainwashing sequence. What Superman saw when Granny Goodness brainwashed him, and then it's got a really cool ending. And actually, there's two sorts of endings. One is, the first ending is after Superman defeats Darkseid. Spoilers. You get to see what happens to Darkseid afterwards, and I thought that was very well handled. I liked the way it was played. I mean, you could have played it other ways, but I think it would have just been. You could have taken it in the exact opposite direction. It didn't exactly go the way Superman wanted it to go, and maybe that's why I like it. And then the other ending is Superman and Lois Lane. And I think up to this point there really wasn't a whole lot of romantic entanglement, attraction shown between the two of them. And you get a little bit of that, as well as you get Superman's doubt about what he can do now that he did so much damage to the Earth after being its protector for so long. And I thought that was a very cool moment. So I think that's about it. So all in all, I think this is a really cool episode. And I think it's really cool that you get to see, because I remember in reading comic books when I was growing up, you would get these references and they would refer to something that happened in a previous issue. And quite often it would be like a throwaway scene. It would, when years later, when I would finally get the back issue, which had the thing that they referred to, it would be like 2 panels about something. It would be nothing. It wouldn't be a whole episode devoted to something. It wouldn't be a whole story devoted to something. And maybe I'm exaggerating a bit here, but I don't know. I think about this particularly in reference to the X-Men, and I can't think of anything more specific than X-Men. But I mean, I guess, for instance, when I first read the X-Men stories where from the 150s, which is about where I started reading Uncanny X-Men, when Corsair, Cyclops' father, shows up, they made references to previous issues, and it gave me the impression there was a whole lot more that was revealed in earlier issues. And I've since gone back and read the issues that they've referred to, and it wasn't a whole lot more than they showed in the issues that I originally read, in those flashbacks that they showed. There really wasn't much more to it. It wasn't like it was a whole issue and they summarized it in 2 panels. It's like it was a 2-panel scene and they basically just redrew that for the flashback. I guess it was a flashback originally and it was a flashback to a flashback. I don't know. Anyway, I think it's really cool that this whole story, in addition to stories like A Better Tomorrow, from the first season of Justice League, are actually entire stories, and that they actually build on them and do more. So, anyway, Superman Legacy, which it should be no surprise was written by Paul Dini, because he wrote a lot of the really cool Superman and other from the Bruce Timm series stories. This was, I thought, was an excellent story to end the series on, but it really made me want more. So, if you haven't seen it before, I recommend you watch it, especially if you've seen JLU and Justice League, and you should really watch all of them. So, whichever parts you haven't seen, but this really feels like a prerequisite for watching. Something you should watch before you watch Justice League and JLU. So, that's it for Superman the Animated Series, in particular for the 2-parter Legacy, which I thought was fantastic. Dredd, the movie, or, well, actually it was just called Dredd. I'm talking about the 2012 Judge Dredd film starring Carl Urban, Olivia Thirlby, Lena Headey, and the only other actor, well, I didn't recognize 2 of those, the 2 actresses, but the only other actor I recognized was Wood Harris, who plays a character named Kay, who I recognize from The Wire, who played Avon Barksdale in The Wire. But I was really impressed by Dredd. I watched it last night. I had not seen it before. Passed on it when it was in the movie theater. And I was really impressed. It's not a real long film. It's only about an hour and a half. And it doesn't feel like there's any fat in this movie. It doesn't feel like they put anything in that didn't need to be in there. The movie, for the most part, is all-out action. And the way I see it, it's not, but it's a little more thinky than that. It's not complete all-out action. I mean, I've seen movies where it feels like you're just watching a video game where people are blowing things away. There's just stuff getting blown away or hacked up or whatever, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just, I don't know. When I think of that, I think of that the third Matrix film, Matrix Revolutions, I think it was, which to me, a heavy portion of that movie was just this long battle, and there really wasn't anything to it. Anyway, I'm getting away from what I want to talk about, which is Dredd. But the way I see this movie, looking back at it now, it seems like it's basically a 2-act story, and the second act is the majority of the story. And the first act takes about maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and that's basically got 2 scenes in it. The first one is Dredd chasing down it basically introduces Dredd. You see Dredd chasing down a couple of perps. It introduces Dredd, and it also introduces this drug, which I think they call slow-mo, which is a drug that makes everything feel much slower than it actually is. And so you get to see the people he's chasing using that, and that gives you a taste of that. And at one point I thought there was going to be a lot more of that. There's going to be a lot of slow-mo, and I think part of the reason for the slow-mo was probably for the 3D, which I didn't see this in 3D. I watched this on Netflix, so I wasn't getting any of the 3D effects, but there were scenes where you could tell, oh yeah, that's probably where they're using 3D, because it seemed like things were, even though I wasn't wearing 3D glasses, it seemed like there were things that were probably jumping out of the screen just from the way they were colored. And so the first scene in Act 1 introduces Dredd, and then the second scene introduces his partner, which is a rookie named Anderson. And this got me thinking, even before that, I think I started thinking about, there was this episode of Sidebar recently. Sidebar is a podcast. You can find it at sidebarnation.com. And on a recent episode 275, they did an episode called Real Talk, Action Movie Tropes and Cliches. And they just talked about the sorts of things, the cliches, the tropes that you see. And because I had listened to that a couple weeks before watching this, fairly recently, I couldn't help but look at the movie through those eyes, of looking for the tropes, looking for the cliches. And probably the first one that jumped out at me, well, I mean, there were some scenes, I think, probably some things in the chase scene, but then the whole idea of the rookie working with the seasoned veteran, I mean, that's definitely a movie trope, and there was other things that would show up, but I think in many ways this movie did not just live off of, or did not consist solely of tropes. But still, it was in the back of my head. And if you like action movies, or if you like movies probably, but it's especially if you like action movies, you should listen to that episode of Sidebar. And that's episode 275, and you can find it at sidebarnation.com. So Act 1 I've talked about. Act 2 basically is the rest of the movie, which is Dredd and Anderson go to investigate a triple murder in this big housing complex and end up getting trapped there and have to fight their way out. And at one point I thought maybe they were going to get away from the complex and then come back to it, but they don't. They're basically stuck in there the whole time. And this housing complex, it's a huge, this of course is set in the future. And Mega City, I think, is the name of the place where it's set. And it's this huge housing complex. It's 200 stories high. And so, there's this, basically, they're trying to, basically the whole housing complex is controlled by this gang, the Mama gang, and so basically it's 2 against, I don't know how many thousands, and it's so basically what it boiled down to is, how are they going to get out of this? Are they going to get out of this, and how? Obviously Dredd is going to get out of this, but how are they going to get out of this? And which is one of my favorite things, because even when I see a movie and I think, well, this character can't die, this is the main character, part of what I find intriguing about a movie is trying to figure out, is watching how exactly it's going to get done. Okay, I know they're not going to kill this character. I know he's not going to get his arm chopped off, even though it looks like it's going to happen, or whatever. I'm just throwing that out as an example. I don't know if that happened in this movie or not, but how is it going to happen? And that's where I think movies can really show how good or great they are. So this movie didn't have too many identifiable characters. Most of the gang, I mentioned Kay, and I mentioned Dredd, and I mentioned Anderson, and really the only other big identifiable character was Mama, also, which is short for Madeline Madrigal, who's the leader of this gang. And so there weren't too many characters. Oh yeah, Judge Anderson. Okay, so Judge Anderson was this, it's a young woman who didn't quite pass the exam, but has this mutant ability to read minds. And they do some neat stuff with that, and that plays a role in it quite a bit. It comes up very frequently, although it helps them out, her and Dredd, in a number of instances. But it doesn't, I don't think they overuse it. I didn't feel like, well, why couldn't they have just used that to solve this situation? I never felt that way. It's possible other people who saw this did. Another cool thing about it was that is their guns, the judges' guns. They fired different types of ammunition, and they actually did run out of ammunition at one point. So it was realistic in that way, that these guns are not, although I don't know how many rounds they fired by the time they finally ran out. Let's see, what else? And they fired different types of ammunition. So there was highly HE rounds, highly explosive rounds. There was incendiary rounds, or Willie Pete probably rounds, white phosphorus. I'm not sure what those incendiary rounds were made of, or what the incendiary was made of in them. So, I mean, basically it was one big shootout, and they start at the bottom of the building, and they have to work their way to the top, and then at one point they get separated, and they go up against some extremely heavy firepower, and Mama shows that she's willing to wipe anybody out that gets in the way. She doesn't care. And anyway, on the whole, I thought this was a really fun movie to watch. I sat down, like I often do, to watch a movie, and I said, okay, let's see how far I can go with this. I'll watch the first 10 or 15 minutes, and if I like it, I'll keep going. And I wanted to keep going. I did not want to turn it off. And I wouldn't say it was perfect. I wouldn't say it was great. I'd probably give it 4 out of 5 stars. And my reason for that would be that it didn't really have any good character moments. I mean, it was a very well done movie. They didn't try to over-explain things. And there were probably things that you could question if you really wanted to. Where they didn't exactly explain how certain things came to be. I thought the action was well done. It wasn't one of these movies where you just see things flying everywhere and it's completely unclear as to what's happening. There were brief moments when that was the case, but it wasn't like some movies where it just gets so ridiculous. You just see things flying back and forth and you can't tell who's punching who or who's shooting at who or what exactly you're saying. But that was not the case in Dredd. I thought the fights were well choreographed and well done. Good use of special effects. Yeah, I'm looking over my notes now. I think I've talked about everything that I wanted to talk about. So, and the other thing I should say is I've never read any of I may have read a little bit of Judge Dredd. I haven't certainly. I don't think I've ever read any stories in their entirety. Certainly no time recently. But I was very impressed by this movie, and just for full disclosure's sake, I enjoyed the first movie when it came out. I thought it was kind of silly. The Sylvester Stallone Dredd film. I thought it was kind of silly. But I enjoyed it for what it was. But this one is a completely different film, completely serious, very well done, and certainly worth watching if you're a fan of action movies, if you're a fan of, I'm not a fan of the Judge Dredd comic book simply because I haven't read it. So I can't vouch for that. But I think if you are, you'd probably like it. And like I said, 4 out of 5 stars from me for Dredd. This is the 2012 film. Okay, a couple days has passed, and I've been thinking about Dredd. And I also listened to a couple podcasts. I listened to... This movie came out a couple years ago. A little less, almost 2 years ago. And I went back, and there weren't too many podcasts that I found on this. One that was dedicated to it was iFanboy did a review of it. And if you search Dredd and iFanboy, you should find that. It was like September of 2012. And then also, Comic Geek Speak did an episode. They didn't devote an entire episode to it, but there was a Comic Talk episode somewhere around episode 1282 or 1284, something like that. And they spent maybe 10 or 15 minutes in there. It's not the first thing. I think it's the second thing they talk about. And in both cases, they gave it positive reviews like I did. There was one thing that occurred to me that bothers me a little bit now that I think about it, that I didn't think about it first, although it was in the back of my head, and that's early in the movie, early in Act 2, there's a point where Dredd and Anderson, capture one of Mama's minions, one of her bosses, I guess. The guy who is played by the actor who was on The Wire. I think the character's name is Kay, and I think I can find the actor's name. Let's see. And the actor's name is Wood Harris. And if you've seen The Wire, you should know exactly who I'm talking about. I don't know of anything else he's been in. I'm sure he's done some other stuff. But the thing is, they catch him early on, and he shows a little bit of resistance after they capture him. But after that, he kind of just seems to go along with whatever they're doing. I mean, he doesn't put up much of a fight with the exception of a couple points. And he doesn't say anything really. He's just like, come on. They're just like, come on. And they just drag him along. And I don't know. It's, once again, I said it's not a perfect movie. It's not a great movie. It's a really good film. And that's just one of those things that bothered me. It's the only big thing I can think of that bothered me that I thought was worth mentioning, I guess. That's it for episode 39 of Dave Talks Comics. Questions or comments can be posted on the episode page at davetalkscomics.com. Or send me a tweet to @DaveTalksComics. Or you can email your questions or comments to dave@davetalkscomics.com. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, I will be talking about the 1989 Hawkworld miniseries, which I thought I had talked about before, but when I went back and looked, I hadn't. And I will be talking about the first 4 issues of John Byrne's run on Alpha Flight. So this is the original Alpha Flight run. Thank you for listening.